Hello again. Welcome back to the Slow Flower Show with Deborah Prinzing. This is episode 601. Well, I've been eager to record a conversation with today's guest, Rita Feldmann of the Sustainable Floristry Network, for quite a while, and we finally did it earlier this week. The Sustainable Floristry Network, or SFN, evolved from the hashtag nofloralfoam campaign, which we all witnessed on social media, as florists from all over the world began to abandon the use of floral foam, an environmentally harmful single-use plastic. At the same time, many florists entering the industry have been turning their backs on outdated education systems that have positioned floral foam as a fundamental tool. Through their shared concern about the floral industry's lack of progress on this topic and other issues, Rita and many other like minded floral leaders, both in her home country of Australia and in the US, Canada, the UK, Europe, and other regions of the world, realized that floristry needs a new type of education. They have founded the Sustainable Floristry Network, bringing together the knowledge of academics, industry leaders, and champions for a better industry to create a more sustainable model for design and for doing business. SFN aims to provide florists with the latest information about sustainability, specifically as it relates to our profession. SFN refers to science to establish the facts and consults expert advisors for guidance in understanding and applying this information. Slow Flower Society has joined SFN as an expert advisor to come alongside this inspiring initiative. Now that it's official and we're featured on SFN's website along with other impressive leaders, I wanted to introduce Rita to the Slow Flowers podcast audience and our larger community. You'll find our conversation enlightening, and I hope it calls you to action. I'll share more resources and our sponsor thanks after the interview. Let's jump right in and get started. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Slow Flower Show with Deborah Prinzing. I'm so excited today to welcome Rita Feldmann of the Sustainable Floristry Network as my guest. Hi, Rita.
Hi, Deborah.
What a treat to have you here. We've never met in person, just on platforms like this. But I'm a big cheerleader of what you're doing, and several of our Slow Flowers members are involved with the Sustainable Floristry Network as ambassadors.
The SFN idea, I think, came out of a conversation with Shane Connolly after a Sustainable Floristry event in the UK in 2018, and we both sort of put our heads together and thought,
well, that's great. And I know Shane Connolly is one of your ambassadors, so we'll talk more about that. I will have to say, when you first got on my radar, is when you had started the hashtag #NoFloralFoam on Instagram, I believe. Is that an accurate attribution?
No, there were 36 existences of the #NoFloralFoam hashtag. I guess I made it a little bit more popular with the account.
So we'll talk about your path to this wonderful new project, but let's just introduce Sustainable Floristry Network to people and talk about what it is. For one thing, you are not coming to us from the U.S. You're coming to us from Australia. Okay, and where exactly are you in that beautiful nation?
I'm based in the Dandenong Ranges, which is the hills to the east of Melbourne, down south, which is also the sort of main flower growing region in Australia. So about 40% of the flowers produced nationally are grown over there.
That's amazing.
Just over the hills.
That's amazing. Yeah, you might have to have your first conference there, and I'll try to make it because I would love to visit. But you're international. I mean, yes, you have a lot of ambassadors from Australia because that's where your first sort of circle probably of involvement that you reached out and got people to participate. But describe what the network is now and who's involved.
So the network is, look, I see it as being a bit of an education hub for this growing idea of sustainable floristry. So on one hand, we've got our ambassadors who we identified quite early on. We wanted to be able to recognise these individuals for the work they were doing at the start of the movement. And I think we're talking about floristry as distinct from perhaps separate to the growing. And then we've got our sort of experts that we're taking guidance from. So I guess the way that we look at it, it's like a new discipline, or a
Yeah,
new, a new school of thought for floristry. So we're bringing together industry and academic experts, looking at greater goals in terms of sustainability, um, and then applying these ideas to work to the industry, or to working florists, and how can we contribute to these greater goals as
that's
florists.
amazing. Yeah, that's fabulous. And when did you, well, and I will also say, in addition to those folks, you've now started bringing in partners, and Slow Flowers has happily joined in as just a kind of an associate or affiliate to
Yes.
support what you're doing, because we believe in it entirely. It's just so aligned with what the Slow Flowers movement is. So it's kind of hand in glove.
Yeah, and we need individuals like yourself with so much knowledge and experience behind you, because as we go forward, we want to tackle different subjects. So what we've done is create a continuing professional development program for florists. And the reason that we did that program was because floristry is pretty much an unregulated industry.
Right.
Um, we did a survey, and I don't have the stats exactly on hand, but something like, they're actually on the site, but something like 30%, a third of all florists go through a traditional teaching system. The rest are learning on the job, self-taught. Like the percentage of florists self-taught is really, really high.
Right.
And so there's no real standard there with regards to approaches to business or design. And of course, since social media sort of exploded, we've seen a lot more florists come along. And we know also from the same survey that a lot of florists finish up after 3 years. So
You
there's
mean
a percentage
they exit the
short.
profession?
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Or
Wow.
that there is a certain, look, sorry, that they've been in it certainly for a short period of time. So the long stayers, it's only a small percentage.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
maybe.
I mean, it's so interesting, but you think about, like, what are the barriers to entry? There are very few. You need access to water and few vases and a pair
Yeah,
of clippers or a knife. I mean,
yeah,
I can see why this has been under the radar for so long, in terms of lack of structured certified training, or accredited training, or universal sets of standards.
that's right. And also we've seen such huge changes in wholesaling over, say, the past 50 years. Um, Now, certainly I can speak locally that the wholesaling world is set up to cater to, like, you can walk into a wholesale and it's like a supermarket. You can select from everything, whereas, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the world of wholesaling was very, very different. Um, and it was structured more around markets. It was unusual for florists you might buy a few things from a wholesaler, but certainly with our family businesses, we were certainly dealing a lot more directly with growers,
Hmm.
either directly from the farms or through the market. But
Hmm.
that structure's changed a lot too.
Hmm. That's a really good point. So the I guess we should back up a little bit and just define what are kind of the hallmarks of the sustainable floristry practice that you and all your ambassadors and advisors have kind of identified. Just so we're all talking about the same term, because sustainability is one of those kind of fluid terms that gets co-opted very easily, kind of like natural or organic. And sometimes the intent means different things to different people.
That's correct. Look, it's a sustainability is trying to find a balance between these three pillars of sometimes it's people, planet, and prosperity, or trying to find that balance and find a system which supports all three.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, And so when we take greater ideas about sustainability and what they mean, and like who do we look to for as authorities for that? Well, there's plenty of, large global organizations who have done huge amounts of work that set it out very, very clearly for us.
Yeah.
And so as sustainable florists, we're trying to address all three. So yes, we need to run a business, but we also need to consider the needs of people within that supply chain. So a lot of the time it's about looking at the life cycle of products, where they've come from and where they're going to. And so if
Hmm.
we're looking at flowers, we're looking at who's grown them, under what conditions have they been grown, um, and then at, of course, end of life, where are they going to go? What materials will they be mixed with? How is this set up? How are domestic waste capabilities
Hmm.
set up to deal with the waste from flowers? Because really, it's the consumer that's ending up, or the customer,
Yeah.
with the materials at the end. Um, we need to look after the people. We've seen this huge shift in global floriculture. um, Now, what is it? The percentage of flowers in the US is what, 20, 15, 20% locally grown, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. About
Yeah,
20%. It's
yeah,
needle is not moving very fast
yeah,
to go back up higher. Yeah. So the
yeah.
80% of those flowers are coming from other growing regions with different employment practices and workplace practices. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, and we
Mhm.
need, as florists, we need to know that we can support our actions at this point in the chain, can support people in different places. And so we're
Mhm.
talking about the growers and employees of farms and things like that. And we've got all these tools that are evolving to help us with that. Certification, of course, being the
Mhm.
big one. And the other thing that we really are looking at is the environmental side of things, which often gets a lot more weight. So of course we've got the climate issue is number one. It's huge, and we can see that the contribution of this industry is potentially really quite significant,
Yeah. Yeah.
because of the transport and because of growing and heating and
Energy
heating
use.
flowers.
Yeah.
Energy is huge. Um, Basically, with with our course, we're looking at how can we tackle this, what's known as the triple planetary crisis
Mhm.
of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution
Wow.
through our work. And
Yeah.
it's great because the work's been done for us in many cases. There are reports that say, okay, take this away to your industry and apply these things, these ideas. Um, and that's very much where our energy has been focused on trying to.
Okay. So when you started doing, and I alluded to this, hashtag, foam free or no floral foam,
Yeah.
it how did this get how did this bubble up to be from your frustration about lack of sustainable practices in floristry? How did that morph into this organization that now has really ambitious plans to be a global resource for professional florists? I mean, that was and then we threw in throwing a pandemic in the middle of that. So it probably wreaked havoc on your schedule, but
Well, I think early on, so the no floral foam, certainly I didn't set out to run a campaign or anything like that. So
oh,
I was working as a florist, and it came from my own personal experiences of working. I was working. I had a wedding and events business for 12 years just prior to the pandemic,
mhm,
um, and I very much naturally was following these sort of principles that we've now basing our ideas around, I guess. Um, and I was using local and seasonal, and in the beginning I was using foam, and then but small amounts, and then there were a few moments where I went, really had a big think about what this material was and doing, and that's when I went into a path of research, I guess. And so I guess watching the response, what was great watching through the no floral foam account was people's response to support to change, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You
Because they
know,
were asking
tips
the
and
same
tricks.
questions you had been asking, right? And just
Yeah,
looking for
absolutely.
resources. Yeah.
Yeah, but not just about the foam, because there at that point there was very little information about foam, so we had to really, you know, set the facts straight with regards to what it was and the impact it can have and all those sorts of things, and that went down a path, and then there was a study published, um, and then after after that, the priority was teaching people different alternative design, and of course I grew up doing floristry pretty much without foam.
Mm.
Um, so it was about sharing those skills. And it's funny because I still haven't done any teaching and I've got so much. I'll get there one day. In terms of actually practical, events and arranging and all that sort of thing. So,
Application of all these
yeah.
concepts.
And it grew out of, so the SFN grew out of that. Um,
Okay.
I went and spoke to, as I mentioned before, Shane Connolly. I spoke at a sustainable forestry afternoon that Shane hosted
And you went to London for that.
in the UK. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was, yeah. And we had a small audience of 30 people at the Garden Museum. Um, and then Shane and I were just, we had lunch and then we were walking across the bridge and we're just like, we need a resource. Like how are we going to change this
Mm-hmm.
system that is really flawed and problematic?
Yeah.
And that's where I really wanted to create at least a website, because I'd actually, prior to running my business, I'd worked on this fantastic project, a federal government initiative here in Australia, which was called the Raising Children Network,
Huh.
and that was funded by the government, and it was like a central information kind of educational site that parents can go to and say, look up something about trying to get a toddler to sleep, or how to
Mhm.
manage grumpy teenagers, or whatever it is.
Oh, I love it. It's like a complete,
Yeah.
like there was a whole matrix that you could just follow,
Yeah.
understanding how does information get shared
Yeah.
and is accessible to people.
That's correct.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Well, the path to flowers for you, you said you had your own wedding and event business for 12 years in Australia,
Yeah.
um, near Melbourne. That was your main market.
Yes.
Prior to that, what were you working in education in this government job, or had you have prior experience in floristry?
So I'm second generation florist.
I
So
thought so. You have a
yeah,
family business, right?
yeah. So I grew up. So I was so from day dot, it was flowers, selling flowers. So my parents started a roadside stand, one of the first in Australia. So I grew
Wow.
up on the side of the road selling cut flowers from a horse and cart, no less.
From a
So
horse and cart. Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
So
I
so
love it.
then in the 80s, my mum, who had a fashion design background, she did the jump over to floristry. And very, very quickly, she's incredibly creative and very quickly had a lot of five-star hotel accounts to
Mm,
service.
hmm.
And so from a very, very young age, I'm talking like, 8, 9,
Mm,
I'd go along. And by the time I was 13, I loved it. I was
yeah.
doing, at that stage, um, every hotel guest would have a buttonhole on their pillow waiting for them when they, went into the hotel.
Oh,
So my
lovely. So
job
you
was
were
like,
making those as a
I was making
13-year-old?
like 150 buttonholes on a Thursday night or whatever it was. So that was really good fun. The minute I could drive at 18, that's it. I was doing the hotel accounts. So I'd go in, I'd drive in with the car, change all the flowers, do all the big boy
Wow.
stuff. So I had a very privileged entry into floristry, because
Yeah.
it can take a long time to get to that stage, I guess. And then I actually went and studied. So I always, for the next, 20 or 15, 20 years, I balanced study or freelance writing with being the emergency backup person in the family flower shops.
What was the name of the shop?
It was the Big Bunch.
The
So
Big
that was
Bunch.
the Big Bunch. So that
I
was sold.
love it.
Yeah, that was amazing business, in Melbourne. It was really and that was sold in 2006. And that's when I moved back out to the hills and started up wedding events. And that just happened to time beautifully with the the birth of blogging and
Yes.
people, and weddings and the wedding flower world exploded. Yeah.
Wow. And did you have a blog?
I didn't get on social media
Oh,
until really late. I was too busy,
yeah. Yeah.
like I was just literally just working.
Just in terms of that history, you had made a reference to the fact that you didn't ever really learn how to use foam, and foam wasn't really your essential tool in your toolbox. Is that because your mother was also pretty much either self-taught or came from another artistic discipline and just, kind of skipped over that step?
No, it's more that we started before it became a
A
really
thing.
popular tool.
Mm,
Um, my mum studied too with florists here in Melbourne, and did a couple of courses. But yeah, it was all vase arranging
mm,
for us. Everything was done in a vase, which is a lost skill, I think, these days. I
mm,
know it's certainly not. There's no emphasis on teaching vase work in the curriculum here.
mm-hmm.
Whereas
Interesting.
to me, that's the number one. Apart from handheld stuff, it's vase work. You do everything in a vase.
So you
You need
weren't, you were
water.
just creating these natural mechanics from the stems, basically, or
Oh, absolutely.
folages.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, and not even chicken wire at that point. We
Hmm.
were literally making in urns and buckets, a bucket of water in an urn, and start with that, and you do a foliage base, and off you go.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when you got a little bit further along with creating the Sustainable Floristry Network, you have a core team of people who are working with you, but you're really driving this in terms of developing the curriculum that you want to have available to people who join the network. And that's sort of what your emphasis has been, I believe, kind of building up to like launching this curriculum later on this year. So is that correct?
Yeah, look, it's been a bit of a moving target with regards to because there's so much information. We want behaviour change and we want it quickly.
Wow.
So we
Okay.
so we want to go through and we want to pick out the information that's most relevant for florists
Yeah.
to understand. Yeah.
I love it. And you had before we started recording, I jotted a few notes down when you said when someone joins the Sustainable Floristry Network, they're asked to commit to a set of business principles. And then when they take the course, which is of course recommended, they're going to kind of be introduced to this level of behavior change in,
Other way around. So we're going
oh,
to ask. So you can join the network once you've done the course.
got it. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay. So,
yeah.
all right. So
Because
what,
there's plenty of people that will want that can have the certificate, and that's an externally accredited certificate. So,
okay.
um, sorry, it's formally accredited as continuing professional.
Okay.
But they may not be in a position to commit to those business principles.
Mm,
That's the reality. There are a lot of people who are perhaps working for larger businesses, um, who their business model is not yet able to support that. But what I am very confident about is that there are a lot of florists who can.
yeah.
There are many, many out there.
Yeah. And will the curriculum for the certificate course how long will that take, and what is that comprised of? Many different modules or?
Yes. So
Mhm.
we're probably going to end up around the 10 to 12 hour mark.
Okay.
There's a lot of video in it. Um, we look at flowers and what goes into growing. We look at chain processes. We look at plastics, materials, specifically foam. We look at the impact on the environment. And then we've done an interview series with um, focusing on two of our experts, Dr. David Beck and Dr. Jill Timms from the Sustainable Cut Flowers project in the UK. And they've done a huge amount of work around certification, There really are global authorities on this sort of subject of certification, horticulture, and global horticulture.
Wow. Okay.
Um, so we've really tapped into their knowledge and as guidance for where we should go, and they're fantastic. They
Oh,
really know their stuff, and we've been incredibly fortunate to have that relationship build with them because they're terrific people too.
yeah, and it gives you all this immediate credibility to have that affiliation because you're not having to reinvent the wheel. You're drawing in people on their subject matter expertise and having
Absolutely,
them
yeah,
participate in this.
yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
look, really, I'm facilitating or coordinating this exchange of knowledge, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that my strengths, I feel really comfortable talking to florists.
Yeah.
I've probably worked alongside or employed several hundred florists
Yeah.
in my life,
Yeah.
and
You've
it's my industry. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, but I've also just been fortunate to have a science journalism background too. So I've been able to merge the two things together.
Mhm.
So it's been yeah, it's a coordinating role really. It's bringing the science of all these ideas and repackaging them in a way that flourishes.
That's so great. Now, the science journalism makes a lot of sense now. This is kind of seeming like a natural path for you because science journalists are often asked to read really complex or interview people on complex topics and then synthesize it to the non-professional for consumption and to understand it. So that you're in that role again
Yeah.
and in the Sustainable Floristry Network. What fields of science were you writing about when you did the science journalism?
Doing a lot of actually health
Mm,
medical stuff.
mhm, mhm.
Um, Quite a bit actually, but my background was my study background was botany.
Wow.
So so
So
it's sort of the
appropriate.
plant. Yeah. So it's sort of all everything, comes together at some point
Oh,
and you just go, oh, what are you going to do with your life? So it's
you're
like, okay,
following
thanks.
you're following your
Yeah.
natural calling, Rita. That is so fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm excited for you because I feel like you have identified a huge missing component in floral education. And I don't want to just say that there are no, places for people to learn professional floristry. And it varies by country. I would say the US is kind of behind compared to maybe what they have in the UK or Europe. And I don't know, is in Australia, you said you went through a course of study. Tell us what was that like? Was it pretty conventional, like a flower school?
No,
Uh,
I personally have not done
oh,
any
oh,
any
okay.
any formal study.
But does it
Um,
exist? Is it exist in your
Absolutely,
okay.
yeah. So there's a Certificate 3 course that is available for florists, and that's sort of I think it's a 2 year like a
Mhm. Mhm.
um, program. And that sort of hasn't changed. Like that's been due for review, but the pandemic has interrupted that, and it's great because I'm talking to educators a lot within the different states, and there's a huge amount of support within teachers
Okay,
to
good.
see change in that system. I mean, like there's so much support, and students are calling for it because they're saying to their teachers, "Why are we learning this? This is going against everything that we're being told not to do,
Yeah.
particularly around the base mediums." But and the problem of having alternative base mediums sort of still exists, but thankfully we're seeing all these great alternatives start to appear,
Yeah.
and more will come.
Well, that leads me to be curious about the, the at least in the US and maybe North America, Canada and the US, there is a lot of you know, there's a lot of pressure. I don't even know if that's pressure is the right word, but influence of manufacturers of products that aren't sustainable because they've got the checkbooks and they can sponsor the conferences and they can sponsor organizations or buy ads in magazines. And so here you come along and Slow Flowers comes along and we're kind of like, we're like this self-funded, upstarts, and we can't compete with those dollars. So that's why it makes so much sense that it's the students and the young people who are, and the consumers who are questioning, and maybe those questions are going to force that change, or at least
Oh,
point out the glaring problems.
yeah. Yeah, we might not be able to beat them on dollars, but we can certainly beat them on education, I think.
I think so.
Um, I think that
I
there's
agree.
I think that there's underestimating the thirst for knowledge,
Mhm.
and the desire for change, and people don't want to do the wrong thing. Florists
Yeah.
don't want to be part of a polluting industry. They don't.
Right.
And
Right.
they're ready, they are, people want to, it's very simple, like
Yeah.
people don't want to do the wrong thing. So um, I think that there's going to be an enormous change coming
Yeah.
because there is so much support. I can see by the number of people that have reached out to us, and um, the positive feedback's all
That's
positive.
exciting.
Yeah.
So the course will, you talked it about being externally accredited. Is that in Australia and through your education program, or will it be in every, like, how do you get things accredited to
So,
apply to
so
everyone?
yeah, continuing professional development, it has international application. So
Okay,
it doesn't matter where. So I think we're probably going to be using a UK-based accreditor for that process.
I see.
Quite a few, but that has a, yeah. So what we want this certificate to mean, or represent, is that when a florist goes to a new employee, they've got something, and we want to see as many people as possible doing that. We can't accredit a business.
I
um,
see. It's just an
Accrediting,
individual.
we can only accredit the practitioner. um,
Okay.
and it's very similar to many industries have
Mhm.
this
Sure.
program. um, Running compliance programs is very, very expensive. And we wanted to create something that was an affordable, um, level of accreditation for this
Okay.
industry. That's the
Okay.
most important thing, because I think such a huge percentage of florists are part-time, and it is, it's a notoriously low income,
Yeah.
you know, usually retail wages.
Right. But what you said about the practitioner, that is the
Yeah.
individual, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But it's like it follows you from job to job. It's a
That's
marketable
right.
skill that you can
That's
take
correct. Yes.
and differentiate yourself
Yes.
when you
And
are joining a new firm or a new shop or a new studio.
that's right. And it's
Love
something
it.
you can tell the consumer too,
Mhm.
because we can't underestimate the push that's coming from consumers for more sustainable
Yeah.
products.
They want a
And
greener alternative.
they absolutely do.
Yeah. So I can see where, like, someone who does own a retail flower shop would maybe financially support their employees to take the course, and then they can say our team of florists are certified through Sustainable Floristry Network, or
Yeah,
something like that. That's
that's correct.
exciting.
Yeah.
That is really exciting. I'm not even a professional florist, and I'm like, I'm signing up. I need to be able to just soak it up and really understand. Also, I think, have the language to talk about this knowledgeably, and not get into these petty fights about shaming someone over using floral foam. Well, no,
That's right.
we're not doing that. We're going to talk about science-based explanations for
That's right.
alternatives, and
That's right.
that's a fact. That's not an emotional argument. I mean, that's just one example, but I
That's
think
right. We don't want florists to come out of this and feel um, intimidated. I mean, there is a level of shock. There is no doubt that when you start getting into the science, there is a level of upset or shock that comes with that sort of realization of the state that we're in, particularly with regards to climate change. I
mhm,
had to go back and do a bit of homework on the IPCC's website the other day, and I came out just thinking, like, oh my goodness, this is too big.
I
This is,
know.
you
Like,
know,
we're at the very last moment of saving
we're
our
at the
planet.
last moment of
Yeah,
saving our planet,
yeah,
but um, get, you know, round up enough people who want to do the right thing. You've seen it even with the foam
yeah,
issue. There's a lot of florists that don't touch it, or at least have cut right back to those moments that they really don't know have an alternative for. So getting a huge shift now, if you can get that with climate, great. We've done. You've got. You have it. We have it. We all have this ethical responsibility to do whatever we can.
Yeah.
So absolutely, we don't want any sort of shaming. We want people to be inspired to have, with new tools or a new understanding, to go forward and make much better decisions
I
about their
love it.
business.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the climate issue, it sounds like some of those are, well, they're such large issues because of supply chain or transportation that the course is going to sort of present the state of the situation and then help students figure out how to self-evaluate and you had said asking questions about their process and their decisions and their sourcing, right?
That's correct. Yeah, to ask questions, and we're using our interviews to help that under why and how and strategies, and it's really important to remember that none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have the perfect solution for anything, really. What we do have is a very, very strong idea of what direction we should be heading in.
Right.
And if you can get that sort of like, giant ship sort of turned around, it's slow, but it is very, very powerful once it's
Hmm.
around. And a lot of that is to do, like the big thing is with flowers and sourcing, and the role that it cannot be emphasized enough how much power florists have in this whole industry, because they're the one that are not only talking to the wholesalers, but they're talking to their customers. And at that moment of a transaction, they can completely shift the dial about where something's going,
Yeah.
where the money is going. You can ring up an example. You've got a wedding, you're there buying, um, you ring up, I need some red roses. We've got, we've got some locally grown, or we don't have any locally grown. We've
Right.
got some that have flown 15,000 kilometres, but we've got beautiful red dahlias. Um, you ring up your client and you say, look, there's only the roses there. These are the choices. Really high carbon footprint, but we've got these beautiful locally grown dahlias. Here's a photo, text it through, decisions made. And I've done that a million times with clients. You can
Right.
shift that decision at that point. So as the florist, you have such a powerful role you can play, in all this decision making.
That is such a great example, Rita. I'm so glad you shared that because I do feel that for the last 12, 15 years I've been reporting in this world, I feel like I've often heard that hand-wringing conversation like, well, I wouldn't do this, but my client wants it. And, my client's asking for something out of season, for example, or that's been imported. And my feeling is, but you're the artist and you're the person
Right.
who has the ability to solve problems creatively. The client hired you because the client doesn't have those skills. And so
That's
it's a more like it's almost like this certification is going to empower florists to make those bolder kind of decisions about their own business and how they choose to run their business to align with their values. And I feel like
that's right.
that's a gift. That's such a gift that you're giving the industry.
And also I think, you know, the word artist's really important there, because we think about where we are now as florists, and for so long, for hundreds of years, floristry has been very closely aligned with art, the art world, and the subject of paintings and flowers.
Right.
Uh, you know, but what it is now, it's shifted to become it's more closely aligned with fashion a lot of the time, and
Yeah.
so and that is problematic, because fashions change, trends change, and what happens is when these colors come through, you get these ridiculous Pantone colors or whatever it is,
Yes.
that the
Yes.
influence comes through, and it's like suddenly everyone wants, you know, royal blue, whatever hydrangea,
Yes.
and that message gets back to the growers. Well, they can't suddenly produce it takes 3 years to establish the plants to satisfy that color trend.
And
And so,
breeding takes even longer, right?
like, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So this idea that that trends and fashion have come to influence floristry so much is a big part of the problem, I think.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And if you can just, I guess, rethink about how you live in the seasons and let the seasons be your fashion statement, I think then you can't go wrong. I mean, that's, in fact, I've said that to people recently where, I'll interview a florist and I'll ask the florist to describe his or her aesthetic. And sometimes people will say, oh, garden inspired or wild and whimsical, or, whatever these phrases are. But when you really drill down to it, people who are in the slow flowers mindset, um, most of them are driven by seasonality. And if that's the case, then, it's just completely in aligned with what is available from the local farm or the local garden. The palettes naturally look appropriate
Yeah, that's I know.
because it's not, it's not this weird, like, bright color in the middle of winter or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing too that's really important with this is the most recent fashions have been so flower heavy. So
mhm,
an absence of foliage. Now, to me, it doesn't make sense. It's this you have a plant and the flower appears for a week for the year. The rest of the plant, the time you're left with this sort of green foliage. So part of the garden, part of horticulture is a celebration of greens and foliages. So, and we've seen that completely disappear from the aesthetic that's dominant at the moment. Um,
right. That's such a good
but
point.
but the actual growth of woody green plants is can be you're sequestering carbon in that
Right,
process.
right.
So shifting to using more foliage, like when I think about how do I survive winter here when there's no flowers, I bring foliage into the house always.
Yeah.
There may not be any flowers around, but you want that buzz, that kick of nature, then you can get it utilizing, like, and then autumn, you're just like, oh, beautiful.
I love it. Oh,
Yeah,
I love it. I couldn't agree more. And I do think that even, when you think, for example, you think in Seattle that where I live, that we're in this, like, a very evergreen city with lots of trees, but there was just a report last week about, like, the number of acres of tree canopy that was lost to real estate development in the last 10 years. And it's sobering to think about, we're losing our carbons, sequestration tools, and our oxygen supply is affected by that. And, just so let's celebrate plants in general and
that's
see
right.
more of them in our floral
Yeah,
designs.
and and berries and buds and the variety, not these sort of this everything's cut to the same length at the same length of development, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
To have imperfection, you have to
Yeah.
um,
I agree.
embrace it a little bit more, I
Yeah.
think.
Says the botanist. Well, listen, this has been so much fun, and I'm so inspired, really, just to encourage your final months of pulling together the course and getting it launched. But people can get a lot of information right now at sustainablefloristry.org. The site is beautiful. You have a lot of resources, links to affiliations and to studies. And so we'll share that link with people to find. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of the homepage, there's a perfect form to fill out and just get on the mailing list. So when new announcements are ready to go, you're the first to hear about it. And also you're very active posting on social media. So is there anything else that you want to sort of leave with people to take action right now and just stay tuned?
Oh, look, stay tuned, and I really look forward to welcoming people on board this sort of journey.
It
I
is.
guess it is,
It's
or a change. I hope that people find our site inspiring, and we welcome feedback too. yeah, it's not something that's just going to be ticked off with one course. We plan to follow this through the next 7 years. And
I agree with you. Like you had, I was thinking that when you're talking about the course, like this is
yeah,
an evolution. This process will continue as
yes,
new
that's the
research
goal.
comes through and new resources come through.
Yeah, we're going
Um,
to tackle new subjects each year.
That is amazing. And there's just I've really enjoyed what I've read on your website, and I think there's a quote on here that where you talk about something to do with, maybe it is your manifesto, when you talk about basically wanting to work yourself out of existence. Like, wouldn't it be great someday if all florists were just thinking about their actions and how they mean to the planet, and that in the future, maybe an organization like this won't need to exist. I think it'll be a long time. I think you're a powerful voice, but I just think that that's a lofty goal to say, we want to get to the point where this is just a natural behavior pattern for
That's
florists.
correct. Yeah, we want a new standard for floristry, and the
Yeah.
ones that set around. Yeah,
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And we will share all these links and resources in our show notes at slowflowerspodcast.com. And Rita will hopefully meet in person sometime in the very near future. I just
hopefully.
enjoy and appreciate you so much.
Thanks, Deborah. Likewise.
That was great. Thanks so much for joining us today. You'll find the replay of this video and more resources discussed in the show notes for episode 601 at slowflowerspodcast.com. In the near future, SFN will announce its continuing professional development course and membership program, setting a new standard for floral design based on sustainability principles. These principles are entirely aligned with the Slow Flowers Manifesto and will elevate floral education to an essential new level. I'm excited to support this campaign. Let's thank our sponsors whose financial support brings the Slow Flowers Show to you. This show is brought to you by slowflowers.com, the free online directory to more than 850 florists, shops, and studios who design with local, seasonal, and sustainable flowers, and the farms that grow those blooms. It's the conscious choice for buying and sending flowers. And thank you to our lead sponsor, Farm Girl Flowers. Farm Girl Flowers delivers iconic burlap wrap bouquets and lush, abundant arrangements to customers across the U.S., supporting U.S. flower farms by purchasing more than $10 million of U.S. grown fresh and seasonal flowers and foliage annually. Discover more at farmgrowflowers.com. And thank you to Red Twig Farms. Based in Johnstown, Ohio, Red Twig Farms is a family owned farm specializing in peonies, daffodils, tulips, and branches, a popular peony bouquet by mail program, and their Spread the Hope campaign, where customers purchase 10 tulip stems for essential workers and others in their community. Learn more at redtwigfarms.com. And thank you to the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, a farmer owned cooperative committed to providing the very best the Pacific Northwest has to offer in cut flowers, foliage, and plants. The Growers Market's mission is to foster a vibrant marketplace that sustains local flower farms and provides top quality products and services to the local floral industry. Visit them at seattlewholesalegrowersmarket.com. And thank you to Longfield Gardens, which provides home gardeners with high quality flower bulbs and perennials. Their online store offers plants for every region and every season, from tulips and daffodils to dahlias, caladiums, and amaryllis. Check out the full catalog at longfield-gardens.com. The Slow Flower Show is a member supported endeavor, and I value our loyal members and supporters. If you're new to our weekly show or our long running podcast, check out all of our resources at slowflowerssociety.com. I'm Deborah Prinzing, host and producer of The Slow Flowers Show and The Slow Flowers Podcast. Next week, you're invited to join me in putting more slow flowers on the table, one stem, one vase at a time. The content and opinions expressed here are either mine alone or those of my guests alone, independent of any podcast sponsor or other person, company, or organization. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll see you